Hello, everyone. My name is Frank Fan. I'm partner solution architect from AWS. We also have Matty Courtney from VMware. He's a cloud solution specialist with us today to discuss migration planning and options for VMware Cloud on AWS. So why we need migration planning? And today's agenda, we'll cover that reason and introduce a few approach for you to start with. And then we'll discuss architectural decisions and compare the difference. And in the end, we'll wrap up the call with some demos for you to have a look and feel what it looks like. And then let's talk about why we need planning. We have observed some failures if you don't have inadequate preparation work. For example, you fail to identify related or internal workload dependencies before migration. For example, such as components of multiple applications or components included in your application stack. For example, you have a web server, business logic, and database as a group of servers. You need to understand, you need to migrate them over as a group. And secondly, you also need to know the external workload dependencies, such as you might need to update DNS records. And also you need to ensure you have a connectivity with your existing Active Directory server for authentication, or you need to leverage new ones. In the VDI environment, probably you need to think about where you are going to continue having your file server. So this is all the external dependencies you need to consider beforehand. Last but not least, what about your ecosystem support this virtualization platform, such as your compliance, security checks, and backup and restore. If you have some third-party plugin in your environment, you also need to validate that beforehand. What's the approach? It's quite simple. It's a common sense. And then we should start with understand your environment. We need to collect some data, not only from technical perspective, but also need to better understanding your business driver and also business requirement. And then we analyze this data collected and make an informed decision about what method would be best fit for this workload. In terms of data, start with business data. So you map up your known applications, which VMs are involved in the scope, and understand business value. After you migrate them over to public cloud, what are you going to get as a business outcome? And also get buy-in from application owner and liaise with your application people who maintain your application and continue the development around that. And also important to categorize your VMs as cattle or pet. Cattle means it's easily stood up and replicated and easily replaceable if they fail. You do not have special handling instruction or management needs. And usually it's non-persistent and you can easily build from scratch. So a good example is your web service. Pets are treated differently, right? These are special workloads you manually build and need special considerations in terms of management and maintenance. If it fails, it's a big deal for you. Apart from that, it's good to understand your security compliance needs. What do you do today to meet your current regulation? What's the licensing requirement for your existing workload? And also, do you need any third party to continue support this workload? Now move to a technical criteria. Understand your resources, CPU, memory, storage. Not just the resources provisioned into the environment, but also what's the average and peak resources required. And it will help you to better have a better sizing estimation for the target platform. And also understand the network connectivity. What's your bandwidth latency between your on-premise environment with public cloud, and what's the current latency across your VMs. So in better understanding this connectivity will help understand, okay, what are the VMs is a given VM communicating with. So you have that application dependencies captured. And also better to understand the details in terms of this communication. For example, number of communications in and out of each VM, and how much data is flowing over these communications. So you understand the network traffic in and out to help understand, you estimate some egress data transfer cost. Last but not least, do you have any big data sets attached with your VMs? If yes, you may consider thinking, is there any different way to accommodate these big data sets? For example, you can leverage some managed storage services like AWS EFS, Elastic File Service, or S3, simple storage service to offload this big data set. Now let's analyze the data. So what are the key factors you should take into consideration? Of course, start from business needs. So, and also during this process, what outcome you want to get? So you need to come up with a pretty clear idea. What applications or application components are the best to move to VMware Cloud on AWS? Are some applications better candidates than others? And how do I rank them? For example, and which VMs should not be moved and why? And how do you ensure you meet the application dependency? Start from business needs. If you already have the compelling event from business, and also you get a buy-in from application owners, yeah, you should definitely think this VM you should as your first choice. And also, we talked about a different category, cattle or pet. Cattle are easier to move than pets, and also you should therefore have a higher rank, and you can also choose to rebuild the cattle VMs in the cloud if you like. In terms of application security, compliance, licensing, all this stuff, you have a plan when you migrate over. In terms of application complexity, so you map discovered application based on the collected VM flow connectivity data. There are many tools can help you to address this. And you can adjust application mappings as needed to incorporate differences. From performance perspective, if you have high CPU intensive applications, highly likely it will benefit from this migration because VMware Cloud or AWS have the latest, faster hardware. Most of the time it's faster than your on-prem legacy hardware, and it gives you better performance. And storage I/O intensive applications will likely benefit from VMware Cloud on AWS because it leverages the faster vSAN storage with NVMe drives and provides a better performance for you. Now it's time to move to the decision. What decision are we going to make? We are going to choose the migration method. So the question we should ask ourselves, is outage acceptable? Which means, can you organize some maintenance window with your business owners? Or you should maintain a specific SLA from your business. Is application, you should also capture, can you continue using your existing IP addresses, or you should re-IP? And what effort we should put in terms of the migration? For example, do you meet some prerequisites for some migration method? And how complex it is? And how long does it take for you to meet these prerequisites? that come to the time frame for your migration. And in the end, cost is also a consideration for, as we mentioned earlier, if you have a large data set, you can consider offload this data set to the cost-effective storage services to reduce the number of hosts required as a target platform. So this is overview about the migration approach and some consideration for you. Let me hand over to Matty to talk about other details.
Okay. So as we've alluded to, there are a few different methods that are available to you to migrate your workload to VMware Cloud on AWS. And we can see here on the left-hand side, we've got a typical three-tier application. We've got the database tier, the application tier, and the presentation or the proxy tier. And over on the right there, we can see some suggested migration methods. So for our proxy tier, which is a non-persistent workload, it's stateless web servers that don't have any data that needs to persist. Perhaps the simplest migration method is to simply rebuild those from scratch inside VMware Cloud on AWS, particularly if you're doing things like using infrastructure as code and able to stand up your workload very easily. That can be a really good way to migrate some workload to VMware Cloud on AWS. Then for our other tiers, our application and our database tier, those are what we would call pets rather than cattle. They have data that needs to persist, perhaps to deploy them is a difficult and complex process. So we need to migrate those tiers from on-prem. And there's a couple of tools available to us to do that. One is what we call Hybrid Cloud Extension, HCX, which is bundled as part of the VMware Cloud on AWS service. And the other is Hybrid Linked Mode, which is where we can establish a linked mode between our vCenter on-prem and our vCenter in VMware Cloud on AWS. So in terms of what it looks like, for hybrid linked mode, on the left here we can see we've got our on-premise infrastructure. We're using AWS Direct Connect to establish a virtual interface to our VMware Cloud on AWS software-defined data center. And once that's established, we're able to extend networks, layer 2 networks, and vMotion VMs across from on-prem to VMware Cloud on AWS. Using HCX, it looks quite similar. On the left, we've got our on-premise data center. On the right, we've got our VMware Cloud on AWS software-defined data center. Between them, we're using AWS Direct Connect with a private virtual interface. We can also do this over public internet as well. And what facilitates all of this is some HCX components. You can see the legend up in the top left there depicting what those components are. We deploy an HCX endpoint into our software-defined data center in VMware Cloud on AWS. And then there's some virtual appliances that get deployed on-prem to establish that peering between the two data centers. And that's what facilitates layer 2 network extension, WAN optimization, and what we call the hybridity services, so the ability to move our workloads from on-prem to the cloud and back again. There's a few decisions, which of these methods is the most appropriate for you to use. And it really comes down to a couple of things. One, what versions of vCenter are you running on-prem? how much bandwidth do you have between your on-prem infrastructure and your VMware Cloud on AWS infrastructure, and what is the latency? And what are your requirements around bulk migrations? So hybrid linked mode, it's relatively easy to configure. You do require a direct connect to AWS, and there's some bandwidth requirements. So to do a vMotion, a live migration, you need a minimum of 250 megabits a second with a latency under 100 milliseconds. You also need to be running relatively recent versions of vCenter on premises. So vCenter 6.7 U1 or vCenter 6.5 patch 3 or above. The alternative is HCX. There's a little bit more effort involved in deploying it, but it is supported over the public internet, a VPN or direct connect. So if you don't have a direct connect, it can be a good option. It also supports much older versions of vCenter on-prem. So we can support from vCenter 5.1 and above. And because there's WAN optimization included in the HCX ecosystem, we only need 100 megabits a second or better as the bandwidth to do vMotion. So to recap, hybrid linked mode, little easier to set up, but it does require more bandwidth and more recent versions of vCenter. HCX, a little bit more flexible in terms of connectivity and on-prem versions, with a little bit more time required up front to set it up. In terms of how we execute our migrations, the first thing we need to do is determine the method that we're going to use. Is it going to be a cold migration? Is it going to be a live migration? Are we going to re-provision our workload in VMware Cloud on AWS, or are we going to use tools like hybrid linked mode or HCX? Then we need to consider the order of activities. You know, in which order are our applications going to move, or tiers of our applications going to move? And is there any refactoring that we can do beforehand? Frank mentioned earlier that we can look to use some cloud native storage services like AWS EFS or AWS S3. So perhaps we want to refactor those things before we move the application. We then need to determine the waves of migration. So which applications, which tiers, and when. And of course, we need to work in with the change management processes within your organization. So raising change requests, ensuring that they're approved, the right people are assigned to the change, and that they have the runbooks and processes available to them to successfully execute the change. So we're going to jump into some demos. I'm going to hand back over to Frank, who's going to demonstrate hybrid linked mode first.
Yeah, this demo, we basically is a lab environment. We have our hybrid link mode connected. So now log in to the VMware Cloud on AWS environment. You can see this is a hybrid link mode, and you can have a single pane of glass to manage resources from both on-premises and VMware Cloud on AWS. So now we are looking at the VM running on-premises. This is a Ubuntu server. We just click migrate. We have done this. You know, I'm sure you're familiar with vMotion. So change storage and destination and your computer destination, and then choose the environment in VMware Cloud on AWS. Now it's all choose your storage. Here we choose that vSAN storage as a target. And then we pick up the right folder you want to put in. And networking here is important because we do the layer 2 network stretch. So here we already pick up the right network, which is stretched across on-premises and VMware Cloud on AWS. Now you can see the vMotion is in progress and it's completed. And once it's complete, you can see it's going to show up. So here, to be aware of this, it's not only you can migrate from VMware from on-premises to VMware Cloud on AWS. You can do the vice versa. So you can also choose to migrate back. So give you that flexibility to migrate workload. So I wouldn't probably wait. I'll probably just quickly, let's see. It's going to complete. Okay, now it's completed. And then that the VMs, now you will see it show up in the target platform. Now it's over there. And you can choose migrate back if you like. Now I'm going to hand over to Matty to talk about HCX migration.
Thanks, Frank. All right, so here we are logged into an on-premises vCenter. And we can, if we have a look in our inventory, there's our prod data center, logging into the VMware Cloud on AWS console. I've got a few software-defined data centers deployed. I'm going to jump into one that's deployed in US East in North Virginia. You can see the HCX add-on is active. Opening up vCenter, we'll have a little bit of a look at what the vCenter inventory looks like in our software-defined data center. So you can see there the data center name is SDDC Data Center. I've got a plugin installed on-prem called the HCX plugin. You can see there the pairing has been established. And if we jump into the interconnect section, we can see the HCX components that have been deployed on premise. And the key is to make sure the tunnel is up over on the right-hand side there. We've got one network stretched, so that's a layer 2 network extension. And that's what's going to enable us to move a VM from on-prem to VMware Cloud on AWS live without any changes, no re-platforming, no re-IPing it. So from migrate VM02, I'm going to ping migrate VM01, which has an IP address that ends in .180. And then to migrate it is as simple as right-clicking, go into hybridity actions and migrate to the cloud. And just like any other vMotion, we need to specify the destination, so where it's going to land. The first thing we do is select that network. Then I'm going to select the destination resource pool, the destination storage, and the vCenter folder that it is going to be migrated to. So these are all objects in the vCenter inventory in the SDDC. I validate that the migration can take place. Very shortly, we're going to see it appear in the recent tasks down the bottom. But if we jump into the HCX plugin again and go to the migration dashboard, it will show us our task. So we can see there, migrate VM01. We're just collecting some source virtual machine details. Checking out what the inventory looks like. Over in the destination vCenter, we can see that preparation is underway, and that migration has just completed, and we can see that it's appeared in the vCenter inventory on the cloud side. Finally, copying some data. And you can see one of the last steps is to delete the virtual machine from the vCenter inventory on-prem. This, of course, is the VM in VMware Cloud on AWS. It's been added to the vCenter inventory. It's got the same IP address as it had on-prem. If we cancel that ping, we can see there was only a tiny amount of packet loss. 5 packets were dropped as it migrated from Texas to North Virginia. And the other thing we can do is we can do a reverse migration. So that's where we migrate back from the cloud to on-prem. So it's a true hybrid cloud solution that allows us to move workload both in and out of the cloud. Just selecting all the destination options again, and if we kick that process off, we'll see very shortly that the migration is completed, and again it will be just a handful of packets dropped as it moves from VMware Cloud on AWS back to on-prem. So the migration back to on-prem is almost complete. And it's done. There it is in the local vCenter inventory. It's still got the same IP address. And again, there was a single packet dropped as it moved back from VMware Cloud on AWS to on-prem.
That's the end of the session, and thanks for joining us. So the key takeaway today is probably still encourage you to do the comprehensive planning, understand the capacity, and understand the consequences after migration. So you definitely have lots of tools we can discuss in the following sessions. And also build a migration factory. It means you have people, you have tools, you have process already in place, so you can repeat these processes. And then just reach out to us, and you're not the first person. I'm sure lots of other people can share their experience and lesson learned. Thanks for attending today's session. We'll see you next time.